everyone. Welcome. I'm Jan Mercer-Doms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. We are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. I'm here today with Amanda Slavin. Hi, Amanda. Welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. I'm so excited for this conversation because if you're watching this with us in real time, today is the first day of autumn 2020. And we have so much to talk about in this very transformational period of time. Amanda, it looks like you are enjoying the sun outside. It looks like for you the first day of summer as opposed to the first day of autumn.
I think I'm, the past 8 months, 7 months, 10 years, I don't know how long the pandemic has been happening. But it's when you even said that prior to us starting, you said, it's the first day of autumn. I said, how is it already the end of September? I don't understand. So I'm living in the past. I'm living in the summer. It's 70 degrees here and I'm enjoying it.
I think we take it each day at a time at this point and, celebrate the sun and blue sky. And, hopefully winter won't come any near too soon, because then that means we all go inside and hibernate for a few months.
I'm saying that's been one thing. I think everything with this experience is risk versus reward. And I love to go out to eat. That's where I find all of my joy, traveling and going out to eat. And so I've still decided, okay, I can go out to eat as long as it's outside. So once it becomes freezing, it's going to be a whole different experience. And I'm going to have to spend so much time with my husband, child, and dog, which is wonderful, but indoors with no other human beings inside. Just taking as much as we can, as we can.
Well, Amanda, that's a really good segue to our first serious question of the day. You are the co-founder of a really cool company called CatalystCreativ. Talk to us a bit about the passion for your launch and what you hope to achieve with it. And, I think it's interesting as we're talking about engagement, and engagement is largely about experience, right? So we're talking about, going back inside and, what are the experiences that we're experiencing during COVID that are finding us joy on a day-to-day basis. But talk to us a bit about then how that translates into the vision and the mission of what you've created.
Yeah. So I started CatalystCreativ 8 years ago, and I was the CEO up until a month and a half ago. So I really, the intention there was I have a master's in curriculum instruction and I was a teacher. And while I was in education, I wrote my thesis on engagement. I created an engagement methodology to measure what it looked like to learn and to really garner the attention of, in that case, it was 6-year-olds and probably the hardest audience to garner the attention of. And I would always say, when I went into kind of business, I would say, if I could sell math to a 6-year-old, I could sell anything to anyone. So I think I'm just fine. And so shortly after I got my master's in curriculum instruction, I ended up in hospitality, and I applied that framework, that methodology of engagement, which was called the 7th level. And I recognized that there are 7 distinct levels of engagement. I applied it to hospitality. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I realized I was missing something. And that was that, intention of inspiration, education. But I really also liked branding, experiential, and marketing. So when I started Catalyst, it was the intention to combine those forces and think differently about the way that we are marketing to people, because I feel that marketing is actually the best education tool in the entire world. If you know what you're saying and why you're saying it, and you're actually communicating intention. And so that was really the idea behind CatalystCreativ, was how do we build community for brands, for cities, for all different types of experiences. And I can go deep into, we started as building a city in downtown Vegas, and then we ended up creating it as a, complete firm that could do this for any brand or any city or any initiative. But the intention was, how can we use this methodology of engagement to deeply and meaningfully connect with audiences and change the way they think about themselves in the world? And so for COVID, I would say that we really had to switch very quickly and pivot very quickly. And we're very resilient. Again, I can talk about so many different things. And if I we're a company it's self-organized instead of a hierarchy. And so that's based on resilience. And we're very, very adaptable. We've always been in a position where we've just moved with the times. And so when COVID hit, my child was 8 weeks old and I was on maternity leave. And my co-founder, who's my best friend as well, was like very trepidatious. He was like, I know you just had a C-section, an emergency C-section and a baby, but we need to figure out a way to bring in like 4 months worth of income because we're 60% events, or we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so I came back from maternity leave early and just hit the ground running. We really prospered during COVID because we started to build community outside of physical experiences, bringing digital experiences to people, making sure that individuals didn't feel alone. And we were really coming from a place of being of service. We did a lot for free just to be able to say, like, we're here for you. We truly are here for you. And then I ended up raising money during COVID and was able to build an entirely new team and transition out as CEO. So in terms of what we have done with Catalyst over these times and how we found joy within that is really making sure, again, that first and foremost, we look at what do we believe in, what do we stand for. This is a very long answer to a short question, but I think it's a loaded question as well in a good way. The 7th level is defined as literate thinking. It's when your personal values and beliefs align. And so we had to go back to what is our 7th level? What are our personal values and beliefs? And it was building community. And so that's what we did. And that's what we'll continue to do. And that gives us joy. And it will, I think it's a sustainable business because everyone always wants to feel a part of something really to do these days. So I think it's really, again, I keep using that word intentional, but I do believe that even as we are speaking to individuals, so let me kind of tell you what I've been doing. When I join calls now, I am very careful not to just immediately jump into business. I really ask personal questions and I try to find out what's going on with people within their lives, because for me, selfishly, I want to connect. I want to get that connection that I was getting in person that I'm no longer getting. And so I've really just had a lot of catch-up calls with people I haven't spoken to in years or people I don't even know. And I really am just asking what's going on in your life. What are you learning during these experiences? But for people that, in terms of building experiences and even team experiences, things that we've used in terms of to get that higher level of engagement where it's not just a yes or no question is really kind of forcing people to speak up. And you start small and it feels awkward because normally when you're in person, it's a much easier thing to be able to know what's going on in someone's life, to understand what's happening, to read their body language. It's much more difficult digitally. And so, we create different prompts. So there's one prompt that you can do where when you start an experience, you ask, what is a word that you're feeling today? Put it in the chat. Or other colleagues of mine have asked people to actually change their name to the word of what they're feeling. And so it's an experience that allows for people to start to build, community around something more than just, how was your weekend? And then from there, you continue to ask questions and you build off of that first question. So first with the emotion, you would then say, okay, wow, these are the words that are coming up: angry, hungry, excited. Like, let's have a conversation about that. And then you ask a question or a prompt that elicits a response. So again, a question could be like, it depends on the experience, but what's a book you read this week that changed your perspective? Or what is something you learned this week? Or, what is something that you are really missing this week that you were doing this time last year? And you make every single person say something. And they can say one word or they can say an entire, long paragraph, the way that I answer questions, but they have to participate. And even for introverts, it's extremely important to be able to build a culture where people feel like they can speak up when it's important. And then what we do as well with a lot of experiences, we have a reaction round. So a reaction round can be anything from, again, this is amazing, or I'm really tired. But you start with that simple task, that kind of level 4 task, like do something simple, give me a word, and then you build on it to get to these higher levels of connection. And I would say that that's just important right now to force yourself out of your comfort zone as it pertains to asking the questions that matter and answering the questions that matter, because I think we're all forgetting that we're human beings. We're trapped and in a lot of ways to our computer screens. And then the last thing I'll say for me personally with individual calls, I do a lot of walking Zooms. And I just say, I'm going to be walking. I know it's not the most ideal situation, but I want to feel like this is a walking meeting, or I want to feel like this is a lunch meeting. But getting out of the house and forcing yourself to do something that, again, isn't just you're latched onto your computer, you're doing the same thing all day, just getting outside of your comfort zone, I think is probably the best bet.
These are amazing ideas and very creative. And I'm wondering at the same time, are brands able to take some nuggets of that as truth and be able to incorporate that into experiences for their employees, for their external stakeholders, for their clients, for their communities? And in what ways have you been really surprised by I think that, so much of the time companies say that they're doing something, and then they check it off a box. But in what ways now are they using this as an opportunity to actually find more meaning in the way that they're connecting? And then how is that then impacting the way in which they tell their own narrative, their own story?
Mm-hmm. Early on in COVID, HubSpot did an entire kind of analysis of open rates with emails, and they found that the open rates for sales emails were dropping, and for kind of marketing-based emails were increasing. That being said, I do think things have become a bit more, early in COVID during the summer, I advised lots of brands to make sure that they were not selling, and that it was really, again, intentional with the way that they were communicating about how they were showing up for their customer. Now it is a bit more business as usual, and I do think a lot more businesses are just kind of going back to their traditional promotional tactics, which I actually think is somewhat okay. I don't think that could be the be-all, end-all. And speaking of frustrated engagement, I am outside and there's distractions. That's right now. I have a baby that's thankfully sleeping, dogs that are barking. I'm trying to limit all my distractions, but it is what it is. So, I think we've done a few digital experiences with some brands, and we've done, 2 with Zappos. We did one with this amazing startup called Speakfully. And the way that we looked at it with digital events is you can either, with events, you can kind of either do campfires or fireworks. And right now it's about intimacy, and it is about, again, finding what are those common denominators that are going to bring people together and have them open up versus these big, high tech, really, over the top experience. I don't think that that's really what people want right now. So what we did with these 3 experiences is we identified, I talked about that 7th level. What is that 7th level statement? What do they believe in? What do they stand for? And how can we create a conversation around that? And so for Speakfully, they're a platform that helps individuals communicate what's going on within their workplaces so that they can create a psychologically safe workplace for everyone. And so we curated a group of strangers that were thought leaders, brought them together. We sent them a box, like a cocktail kit, and so that they felt like something tangible. And then we did an icebreaker. We asked them about what was their first job that made them feel kind of essentially like good about themselves. And then we really dove into a very big topic, which was, what does it look like for a psychologically safe workplace? Why is it important to have a psychologically safe workplace? And we had a 2-hour conversation with strangers about this. And then what we did was we edited that into a 2-minute video to promote Speakfully, really based on what individuals were talking about. And we did the same thing with Zappos around their Zappos maternity line, but we did that for women within Zappos who were pregnant. And we had this unbelievable conversation, and they also got these tangible, physical things that we sent to them, these boxes, so that they felt like unified in some way. And then we had a 2-hour conversation around what was going on with, what did it feel like to be pregnant during COVID? This was very early on in COVID. And everyone's crying and sharing, and they don't know each other. And what that does, again, is it creates this through line, and the brand is the facilitator. The brand is the conduit for connections, for community, for collaboration. You don't even know what can come out of that. But you're starting with, again, always, what do you believe in? What do you value? Then you say, who will connect with that? And then you ask yourself, how can I, again, be of service to the individuals that have been purchasing from me for quite some time? Because they have options. And especially during this pandemic, where people don't have as much income to be able to spend, you need to be really thoughtful with the way that you're asking something of your customer. So I feel give as much as you can first and then request versus asking for more and more and more from those who might not have more to give.
Amanda, you talk a lot about time and attention, right? And those are, valuable assets and but yet also given the fact that we're all have a little bit of ADD right now, just in the sense of all the different ways in which we're pulled, right, professionally and personally, particularly if we're, most of us are still working and living under one roof. How will companies think about that differently as they become more internally in tune with really where people are at today? And, watching our show today, we have a mix of, female corporate executives, business owners, entrepreneurs, and of course, the men that champion and support gender equity. But we know for women, there's an extra burden that we're all experiencing right now with the double and triple work shift. So what does time and attention mean for us today? And what will it mean in the sense of how employers ensure that they're providing safe, healthy work experiences for their team members, but yet also keeping that eye toward productivity?
Women are superheroes. It's just the truth. We're just
simple answer.
It's not a joke. We're just unbelievable species that I think the way that we operate is incredible and should be like worshipped within every aspect of life. And I really do believe that we have such unique gifts to bring to organizations. And I think that not just necessarily women, but thinking in a bit more, and I'll use a gender term, but it's feminine in the way, and that's really a psychological term. These feminine traits that have been seen as soft skills should be embraced within workplaces in terms of nurturing your team. And even I would use the word love. I wrote an article for Entrepreneur years ago called "It's My Job and I Can Cry If I Want to" around showing emotions in the workplace. And I think that it's extremely relevant today. And what I've loved about this experience, I wouldn't use the word loved, actually. What I've appreciated about this pandemic is that you really can see, as you said, you really can see what's going on in people's lives. And so a lot of the times I would connect with someone and they would kind of list out their accomplishments, but now I see their child climbing on them or their dog barking in the background. And it makes them so much more human. And I think that is a beautiful aspect of this, but it's also obviously very distracting for them and for those on the other end of the line. So from that framework that I've talked quite a bit about, we actually applied that framework to a culture building training for remote workplaces, because so many companies were trying to take what they learned and what they also implemented within their office structure and then just place it on top of their remote structure. And that's just not how it works. So I'm also happy to share, I did a free webinar. We have a remote culture score that you actually can take in terms of a test, and you could assess where your company is and where your company needs to be. But some tips and tricks that we learned, I use the levels always because, again, it takes the emotions out of it. So a lot of the times, think of when you're with your partner or even your friend and they're on their phone at dinner and you say, "Hey, can you please get off your phone? It's really distracting." And then they say, "Well, you're always on your phone." And then that becomes versus if you say, "We're at level 3 right now," which means frustrated engagement. I want to engage with you, but I'm distracted. Let's get to the next level together and both take away all of the distractions here. And so when it comes to remote workplaces during a time of complete and utter chaos, really, how do you create an environment where people feel safe? I keep using that word safe, but also where they feel like they can trust that they can get their work done, but they can also be in a place where you understand what's going on in their own lives. It is all about boundaries. So it's about teaching your team how to create boundaries. And it's about modeling those boundaries. I am the worst at that because I will work myself, 10, 12 hours a day. I will email crazy times. But that's why it's unbelievably important for the boundaries to be there for the organization. It's not always about me. So it's not, okay, well, the CEO or the co-founder is emailing me at 2 a.m. so I have to respond. No, I might be pumping milk for my child, but that does not mean you know that. So that means because you have the expectations, what you need to expect from this organization, and we follow through with that. And you're never, ever going to get in trouble for not responding until the hours that we've already communicated to you that. And the other thing I'll say too with our environment is we share all of our calendars. Transparency is a really important value for us. And we say, and we've always been remote for 8 years. So it's easier for us. We started as remote. So we built a culture as a remote organization. But for us, it's about, if you need to go to the doctor, if you need to drop your, child off at, I don't know where you're dropping your child off these days, but if you need to do something that's personal, just put it in your calendar and we understand and we trust you. So I think it's based on trust and boundaries. And also the last thing I'll say is when I was talking about before building off of those small questions that creates a culture and an environment where people can then come to you with, my child is sick and I can't get away from taking care of them today. Or, I have COVID. Or, I'm moving because I had to leave the city that I lived in. They need to be able to come to you with those things, but it doesn't come easily. You have to start with making them feel comfortable enough to share, and then build to that place where they share about the important things that are distracting them from being productive.
You'd mentioned that you had started your company as a remote company. And there are many people watching this episode today who are struggling with how to do that, how to make that transition. And coupled with that, then once workspaces do start to open up, how do you ensure that the 10 or 20 or 25% of the team you have there has what they need to be able to successfully perform their jobs, and at the same time, while those are left behind at home, still feel a part of the culture and still feel that they're being nourished and acknowledged and appreciated, particularly given the fact that we know that many that are left behind may be women because we're homeschooling and et cetera, et cetera. What are your learning lessons from 8 years of building and growing and scaling a company that started off as remote? What are some of your learning lessons, both on the positive side, and I wish we would have known then what we know now?
Well, first of all, your questions are just so well thought out, and this is such a positive experience. And I just want to commend you on this in the way that it's really, I do a lot of these, and I just want to commend you that this is an amazing resource. And you're really thinking about what people need. And that's something that really aligns with me, because you want to add value. So I just love that. In terms of what I wish I had known, start with that, and then I'll talk about some of the positives. What I wish I had known, a lot of the times in remote cultures, productivity actually generally does not go down immediately. Productivity for a lot of the organizations that I spoke with has started at least going up. And then I think there's been lulls because people are bored, tired, hungry, distracted, whatever it may, again, those words that I gave in the beginning, eating all the time, whatever that is, that again is constantly distracting them from their work. But in the beginning, it's like, oh, I can work all of the time. This is amazing. So I think as it pertains to productivity, it's unbelievably important. There's great tools out there like Slack. That is a great productivity tool. But if used it's not about necessarily what to use, it's about how and when to use those tools. And as it pertains to Slack, I feel that Slack is used for very specific circumstances. So if you are slacking someone and you have messaged them 10 times and they still do not understand what you're talking about, I'm going to use a level of engagement. Level 2 is unsystematic engagement. It's when you're confused by the messaging. And actually there's a great, Forbes did a great article using our framework to talk about some of these pitfalls within remote workplaces. And that's really, again, around level 2. Pick up the phone and call the person. Just call them, just talk to them, ask for a video call, ask for a phone call, speak to them as if they were near you. And I know that's difficult because they might have phone calls. So again, for us, we know people's calendars. So if there's blocks in the calendar, we can just give them a call. But when you keep using these tools that were not meant to have paragraphs and paragraphs of you explaining, why someone needs to change one line in a Google document, just call them, because there's going to be a lot of frustration as well. And almost also anger. You become angry where you're like, this person doesn't understand what I'm talking about and I can't explain it. So don't use that tool in the way that you think that you're supposed to use it. Make sure that you're, again, I'm going to use the words intentional, thoughtful, but also that there's buy-in from the entire team on when and how to use the tools at hand. That would be one major situation. The second would be, again, boundaries with your loved ones. So for me, again, I love work. I can talk about it. I can do it every second, but it's really, really important that you do have separation between work and life. And that is very, very difficult. I understand that. But even if it is when we are at dinner, no phones, or, with my child, when I am with him and he's very little, he can't say like, hey, stop being on your phone, but I am not on my phone when I am breastfeeding him, and if I need to be on the phone, and again, I'm lucky. I asked my husband, my partner, for help. Not everyone can do that. So in terms of, again, what you talked about with women, I mean, that's why I say we're superheroes, because we do take on a lot of the responsibilities for our children. And we care so much about our work. We treat our work like our children. And so I don't even know where we fall into where do we fall in? When do we take care of ourselves? And so we need to make sure. For me, it's a walk and it's meditation. I have to walk every day and I have to meditate. That's my bare minimum of taking care of myself. And I have to eat, which is actually a difficult thing. So I put things sometimes in my calendar to eat. So it's that is making sure. And I'll just say, in terms of one positive thing, I would say that, well, I'll say just kind of a combination of the two. You really can acquire talent that aren't just in the same metropolitan areas. So in terms of diversity, and also in terms of diversity with women, I mean, you could hire women that are stay-at-home moms that want to work, or that have children but they want to be more involved in their lives and pick them up from school or when school was open. And so we were able to hire people who, our director of operations has 3 children. And she wanted to work for us because it was a remote environment. So I didn't necessarily answer that last question about the hybrid environment, but I think, again, as long as you have a baseline of people buying into every aspect of your organization and thinking through every aspect and not taking anything for granted ever again, and not just thinking that people know what you're talking about, or people, know the standards of, okay, how they should be working, when they should be working, what does working even mean to you? As long as you're going above and beyond to kind of act like a human being, which feels really weird, then you'll be fine, whether it's remote, whether it's hybrid, whether it's whatever you're deciding. But we should have been doing that all along. We just took everything for granted.
Yeah, you're so right. I think we took so much for granted in so many different ways. And it was interesting when we think back on 2 or 3 years ago, talking about the work-life divide, right? And the conflict with that. And now we think of everything as like this fluid sense of just mush, right? And so, things like boundaries are incredibly important. I want to take this more at the macro level now. And you talk a lot about companies that do good in the world without sacrificing their bottom line. Do you think, this is a very aspirational question now, do you think that companies will actually shift, in maybe large part because of the conversation you and I are having right now, how they really define what ROI means, right? Because historically, it's companies exist to make profits, right? Like to really bring home that shareholder value, or to maximize profits, or to reduce, redundancies or unnecessary expenditures, and et cetera, et cetera. But we're kind of in a different place right now in the sense of just, what does it mean to be a more humane company? And then if companies are espousing that, should there be some sort of correlation then to how they really think about their equity as something more than just what their P&L statement says at the end of the year?
I mean, this is my favorite question in the world, because I recoined ROI as ripple of impact and return on investment. But I still wanted to use the word ROI because I don't think that money is bad. I never have thought that, a lot of people, I feel that doing well and doing good are not mutually exclusive. And businesses can be businesses, but still think about how to do right by their internal customers, their employees, and their external customers. So I think that I've been having a lot of conversations with, executives that are that have left big organizations, and I think it's more than just the pandemic. I think systemic racism, and I think the in terms of the way women have been treated in the workplace forever. I think that obviously the pandemic, there's been a lot of catalysts that have amplified the problems that were obviously already happening within our places of work. And, there's that quote where it's, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And we spend the most time with people that we work with. And so if those individuals are not doing right by us, or not doing right by our customers, then why do we exist in the first place? I always ask a company, like, but why do you exist? And why does it matter that you exist? Do you actually need to exist on this planet, or are you just selling mayonnaise? And I think it's really important. And I use the word, doing good. A lot of companies think of CSR, corporate social responsibility. We're like, okay, well, we need to have a nonprofit arm, and not every company can be Patagonia. But I think it's about doing right by. That's kind of the language that I would want to use. And what does that look like for your customers? And what does that look like for your internal customers, the people that are closest to you? And it's listening. It's really asking a lot of questions. And from that Speak Fully experience I was talking about, and then also this other experience we did with Zappos Adaptive, which is Zappos's line around adaptive wear, which is an unbelievable line. We were talking about kind of what are questions that, or what are advice that you would give to brands right now, in terms of, how they should be thinking. And the piece of advice that I said was listen first. That was it. Just listen. Just listen. That's all there was. I was just like, listen, and then listen first, and then, this is the time to take a minute, to take a step back, ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it worth it? Is it necessary? Is it important? And then from that position and from that place, listen to those that you care about. Listen to your customer, listen to your employees, and then make a decision. And if we all did that, if we all just listened a bit more to the people that were doing all of the work, a lot of CEOs, a lot of executives think they have all the answers. Why do they have all the answers? They're not even probably close to the work anymore. They have executive assistants who have executive assistants who have executive assistants doing the work. So they can't make decisions based on that understanding or misunderstanding. So listen to those individuals that are also doing the work. And to me, that is doing good, is by doing right. And also by thinking about, I'll say one last thing. I gave a TEDx talk years ago called the 3 Ps, and it was, finding a sense of purpose, making a profit, and solving a problem in the world. I do believe that as you are thinking about your business, you should be doing something that's bettering the world in some way. And even if that is making your employees feel incredible about the work they're doing and giving them amazing maternity leave or whatever that is, if you're helping the world be better in some way, I think that's enough. I don't think it has to be everything and anything. I just think it has to be something.
Let's talk also about the word influence. And you talk about how people and brands of influence are the best teachers in the world. What does influence mean today to you?
So I'll tell you what I think it doesn't mean, which is an Instagram influencer. To me, so level 5 of those 7 levels is self-regulated interest. It's when you want to pique someone's interest or get them excited. And a lot of people use social media influencers to do that, which it's so funny with language, the way that we've taken these words that meant something and turned them into things that I think mean nothing. In terms of influencer, I don't feel that these individuals, most of these influencers are actual influential at all. I think that for them, it really is about them. And there's no judgment, actually. It's really, I just feel that if you have influence, you should use it for some purposeful reason, other than selling, lip gloss. And to me, again, that's what's such an interesting, I'm in an interesting position and place because I am in marketing. And I don't think that marketing is a bad word. I think that we need to understand as marketers and as people of influence and as brands that we have a huge audience and we have a responsibility to that audience to, change the way that they're thinking. Because that's what marketing does, right? It changes the way that consumers, which also people consuming all the time. I don't agree with that. Active participants, human beings, it changes the way that they think about themselves in the world. That's what marketing does. So if we actually utilized marketing as a way to change the way people thought about themselves in the world, and it was positive, and we made them feel empowered and excited, and we made them feel embraced and seen and heard, what could that do? And in terms of people of influence, in terms of brands being influential, I say that they're the best teachers in the world. They just need the right curriculum. So often they've been told that likes and followers and comments is success. And I don't agree with that. I feel that we should be striving towards a higher level of success. And I use the levels so much, I know, but I hope that people can take these levels and use them and think about life differently. As I mentioned before, level 4 is structured dependent engagement. Do something and I'll do it. That's comment below, like this post, share this post. That's a lower level. Level 6 is critical engagement. It's when you want to inspire someone to set goals to make a difference in their life. And so that is what we're striving for. But you don't get there in the same way as you would if you wanted comments like. So I would say raise your standards with what connection looks like. And raise your standards on yourself on what you're going to be doing with your influence so that you can actually feel good about yourself at the end of the day, that you're using your influence to make a difference in someone's life for the positive.
Man, I'm going to complicate this for a second.
Okay.
And see if you follow me with this sort of random stream of thoughts.
Love it.
Okay. So, is it that, we've become so hyper obsessed about likes and when you think about like an email marketing campaign, like the number of opens, the number of click-throughs, and teenage girls monitoring their Instagram and their whatever platforms they're on now,
TikTok,
and then TikTok, and then removing it if it doesn't have like a certain number of likes or click throughs or whatever, right? And so there's this incredible pressure. But does that pressure not come from the way in which we've often thought about startup companies and the way that they grow and scale, and what investors are really interested in the sense of it not being about the qualitative data, but about the quantity? It's about counts, right? It's about the it's a different sort of measurement.
Wow.
And, I think about how female entrepreneurs simultaneously want to grow and scale a business, but they don't want to do it from the sort of the big data perspective. They want to do it in the way that you've been talking about to us in our conversation today together, in the sense of making it much more nuanced, much more heartfelt, much more authentic, much more responsive to how we interact and engage and consume at that human being level. So, with all of this said, then would it be fair to say that in some ways the traditional angel VC model may be a little broken? And if it is, then what is a different model that investors would get excited about? Because we can say that we want, as entrepreneurs, to achieve something different than just, kind of the hard counts of things, which is what, how many subscribers do you have? How many users? How many times do they return? Et cetera, et cetera. But then that kind of defeats the purpose of the conversation you and I have been having.
Yes.
So where do we move forward as that? I'm asking you because I know that you're also an investor.
Yes. That's an unbelievable through line that I actually have never thought of, which is shocking because I overthink everything. So I love that. I can give all these links and these resources. I took that 7th level framework and I applied it to something that I, devised years ago called the feminine workplace, which was I mapped out those levels into masculine and feminine traits based on the Athena doctrine, which was, these individuals went all over the world and they identified feminine and masculine traits through surveys. And so levels 1 through 5 are masculine traits, and then 6 and 7 are feminine traits. So again, that environment of nurturing your environment, loving, empathy, compassion, those are those higher levels. But we actually do need the masculine levels foundationally to get there. So there's nothing wrong with either. They need to work together. Thus far, in the way that I always like to go back to the show Mad Men, because when I watched Mad Men, I was like, this wasn't 200 years. Like, this was not more. I think it was, it's like, this wasn't that long ago. And that's what it looked like for women in the workplace. And so, yes, we've come so far, but obviously, again, we're kind of going against the stream. And so most VCs, most investors are men. And even when they are women, the structure that we have been forced to be a part of is very hyper masculine, which is hyper growth. And, again, it's 10x return in a few years. And so I do think that is a part of the problem. I think that the word growth, I love the word growth. And for me, I'm just talking about all these, it sounds like I'm doing 10 million things. I guess I am, but I started also this thing that it's called themamapreneur.com. And it's not even out public. Like, I'm just sharing it with you because now it's coming up. And I wrote a whole blog post about why I wanted to do something. It's essentially like a media platform. And I wrote a whole blog post around that I have always chosen growth. And I believe that you either grow or you die. Like, I look at nature, like those are actually the options. But the way that I think about growth is very different than I think the way that we have used the word growth as it pertains to investments. And I think that we need to start to think more like nature in the way that we're looking at it. We're not like saying to a tree, grow, grow, grow. Here's all more sunlight. Here, the tree would die. I mean, there's a natural process that allows for the tree to grow when the tree is supposed to grow. And yes, we can do things to accelerate that growth through nurturing and through really being, again, connected to what that tree needs. But I think we have created these unrealistic goals of success and growth through this masculine lens. And we need to actually look at it more through a feminine lens. And there's great, the circle economy. It was an amazing TED Talk about, I forgot her name, but it was an unbelievable TED Talk. And she talks all around kind of this new way of thinking about economics and of success. So I highly recommend looking into, if you look up TED Talk, circle economy. And then I would also look at, a lot of biomimicry is looking at nature and taking from nature. But also I did a whole course on the feminine workplace with the level. So I think it's about changing the conversation. And the last thing I'll say as it pertains to investment is when I was raising money during the pandemic, I kept meditating throughout the past year prior to the pandemic. As I've mentioned, that's like a big thing for me. And in my meditation, it kept coming up that this person was going to give us investment, and he is a man. And during the pandemic, he checked in on my husband and I, and that was more of a feminine trait, like compassion and empathy. Hey, are you okay? How's your baby? Whatever. So in that moment, I said to myself, you know what? I'm just going to tell him that I've been meditating about him being an investor, which is not in my in terms of, our first investor was through very crazy serendipitous encounter, and then having kind of a notebook where I put it together a business plan. And then this one came from me saying that I was meditating. So, but I said this to him, he said, well, that's really weird because I've been talking to my team the past year about possibly investing in your company. And so I said, okay, what does this now look like? How can we work together and collaborate to get to that place? What do you need from us, and how can you help guide us? And I was really vulnerable, and it gave him the space to think about us differently. And to be a part of that process. Again, more like a gardener than like a wood chopper. So I think that as we think about business, as we think about investments, we also have to, people in power, which are white men, who was this investor, have to be willing to go there, and challenge the systems that have put them at the helm of leadership. And that is scary. But it's necessary, because we aren't going to be able to get past these structures and systems that are breaking apart before our eyes because of the pandemic, without the support of those who benefit from the systems. And that also brings us up to racism. So that's a bigger topic, but
that's a whole nother show you have to come back for.
Exactly. I would be happy.
Amanda, this has been amazing. Okay, so we have 30 seconds left, and it's time for my favorite part of the show, the lightning round.
Love it. I think
okay. Question number 1. What are you watching right now that you'd recommend?
Oh my gosh, I'm watching so much. I'm just watching so much when I'm pumping. What am I watching? I'm not watching this right now, but I would recommend it. Little Fires Everywhere.
So good.
So amazing. And that last part, that was her quote from the book, I just highly recommend it, about the ashes. Just watch that last episode if anything.
So good. Question number 2. 3 words or less. How would you describe 2020?
A learning opportunity. That's 3 words, but I guess a learning opportunity. A learning opportunity for me, pure joy, because my child was born. And I would go back to that word, intention.
Last question. Advice that you would give to your 85-year-old self.
You can finally rest. You just chill. There is no advice that I know. My grandma's 96. She's my best friend. There is nothing I can tell you 85 years other than you've earned it. Do whatever you want, say whatever you want, eat whatever you want.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Amanda, thank you so much for being with us today. How do our viewers stay in contact with you?
LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. Or they can go to amandaslavin.com, my name. And those are probably the 2 ways that will push to all the other millions of things that I've mentioned today.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. You have to come back. We have so much more. I have so many more questions for you.
I'm in. Open wine.
Thanks, everyone, for staying with us today. Jan Mercer-Dahms, the Vice President of U.S. Development at Join Mayshad. And again, please make sure to check us out at joinmayshad.com and join us. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Bye.